Hi, this is Emily Freitag, and I am joined today by Preston Smith at Rocketship, and excited to hear from really an alternative school model that is focused entirely on the question we've been exploring, which is what do we know about what works and what does not work to accelerate student learning and support intervention. So thank you for joining us, Preston.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much, Emily.
And we're starting all of these from a very personal place. So tell us your own story as a learner and what that informs for you about your perspective about learning.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a low-income community in Southern California and attended local district schools throughout my K through 12 education. This is before No Child Left Behind. So, you know, I think you knew that I knew where I was growing up wasn't, certain places like Beverly Hills or other sort of locations, but you like to believe that, like, hey, the teachers, they definitely care, they're definitely working hard, like I'm getting a decent education. And I was a pretty strong student, very involved student, and so in my senior year, I applied to UCLA, an hour down the road, and I got rejected. I didn't get in. And I went to school the next day, and I also saw a ton of kids did get in, and that was really weird to me. Like I knew my academics, I knew what I'd done at the school, and I was really pretty surprised. And so I called and spoke to an associate dean at the school, and she said to me, "Well, we know about your school." And I said, "Okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what do you know that clearly I don't know?" And she said to me, "You know, your grades are inflated, and we take athletes, not scholars, from your school. So good luck." And that was it.
Whoa. She said that to you?
She said that to me.
Wow.
And yeah, that was this moment of when we talk about destiny of demographics and your zip code and where you go to school, it's 100% right. And nobody really wants to own that or talk about it. Nobody really wants to talk about, there was an article 2 years after that came out that the UC system was shifting SAT scores based on your demographics, like mitigating. And so there's all these sorts of things, like it's widely known about inequities in society. And so fast forward, I mean, I ended up going to Chapel Hill, which is a great school. And, thank God they let me in. And the reality is I struggled that first year, right? I graduated second in my class in high school. I thought I was a pretty smart kid, and I realized really quickly I was way behind my peers, right? They were talking about books I'd never heard of. So I spent the first year in the Reading and Writing Center, which was tutoring. And so, getting a lot of coaching on my writing. I got my work study job was at the library, so I could spend a lot of time reading and catching up. And that's what I did. And so I think it really did teach me, like, frankly, she was right. Right, that associate dean at UCLA was right, that my grades were inflated, that I wasn't prepared for college like other kids were, even though I was second in my graduating class, right? So that's something that really motivates me to this day, right? It's why I joined Teach for America. It's why at Rocketship we focus on elementary education. We think it starts early, and that's where you make the most profound difference for kids and set them on a trajectory and their families that's wildly different. And it's why we do a lot of the things we do at Rocketship, especially in this deep belief that, yes, your zip code matters, your demographics matter. And if no one's going to say that to you, well, you don't want to find that out your senior year when you're getting rejected from college, right? And because a lot of, as you said, right, your question is, she said that to you, right, when it's the truth.
Yeah. Well, thank you for starting us in that place. Now take us to Rocketship and what you have learned at Rocketship. What have you learned works, and what have you learned and maybe tried that you have learned doesn't work?
Oh, man. Well, it's been a journey, right? I was a district teacher, district principal before I started or co-founded Rocketship. So what works? A deep relationship with parents, right? An authentic, deep relation with parents works. It takes real commitment. It takes a real cultural shift and belief. So it can't be checking the box. But if if you're going to truly believe in the statement that the first child or the first teacher of a child is their parent, then like, why wouldn't you start there? So from home visits to authentically getting to know families, authentically welcoming them, creating real space, real opportunities, an open school, like that stuff matters. Speaking in their language, having materials in their language, but it's just having real opportunities on weeknights and weekends, right? Times that are convenient for our families who are working 2 or 3 jobs, making it open to the entire family, right? Aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa. So that matters. It makes a profound difference, right? I would argue you can get good results at a great school with, the parent involvement of like, drop your kid off on time, show up every day, and make sure they do their homework, which if we're honest, that is probably optimal parent engagement for many of our schools, right? You can get good results at a great school. If you want to get excellent or profound results, you better be in much deeper relationship with that family. And it's amazing. Like you can get 10x results with relationship with family. And then I would say
such an interesting time for that, of course, now where I think it is primal.
Yeah, I would also say it's a grave concern of mine in returning back to schools. Like many schools, I mean, I saw this when I was a teacher. When I was a district teacher, our principal, who represented the community, literally locked the gates and parents were not allowed to pass the gates. We would bring the kids to the gate to hand them back to the families at the end of the day because it wasn't safe to bring them on campus, right? That would never be tolerated in certain communities. And that is exactly what we were ordered to do, right? When you think about that, right, like think about the fear, having fewer people on, it's going to become it's going to be okay. In fact, it's a good practice to keep parents off your campus. Like it's further going to ingrain
the leaked CDC guidance encourages it, in fact. It's going to be a government.
I'm not saying, I'm not arguing with that. Like that makes sense, right? We need to limit the number of people on it. That makes total sense. But what I'm more worried about is it's going to make it a good norm moving forward. So when we return to normalcy someday, hopefully 2 years, 3 years from now, it's going to be good. It's going to be okay and ingrained, really even further deeply ingrained that like, no, you keep parents off. I'd also say intervening. So interventions and getting to a child level really matters. Meaning personalized instruction, that's what we call it. And we know that works at Rocketship. So things like guided reading, right? Like where is your level? And let me explicitly teach you at your level. I'll say it's really hard, right? Like it's very hard work. So coupled with that is like you need really robust professional development. And that's for it to be done really well. And then on the intervention side, I'd say, Emily, like it's, kind of like Nike, right? Just do it. The lesson I've learned over time is so reading recovery, amazing model, right? 1-to-1 reading intervention, just incredible, really hard to sustain and scale. The reality is like, you don't have to have a reading recovery with an expert teacher 1-to-1. You could do a more rudimentary like LLI intervention with a small group of kids. But if you do it every single day for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, it's that consistency and almost that saturation that makes a massive difference, especially over an extended period of time. So the lesson I've learned is it's like, an expert teacher absolutely can move a kid 1-to-1 really rapidly, but it's really hard at a school to scale that. And so one of the things at Rocketship is we have intervention and tutors in our model. That happens every day, especially for certain kids. And so that consistency and that saturation, it moves kids. And so I think that's just been a really clear lesson for us. And the reality is that most schools, there is no consistent sort of format for intervention or consistent format for small group work. And often on the intervention side, you'll hear, well, like we need reading recovery, right? We need expert teachers and one-to-one. And I actually don't think that's the case.
I like the notion of consistency and saturation. Let us go back for a second, because I do think there's a pretty healthy debate that is, that we're intentionally exploring in this, around this question of at level, grade level. And so just speak from what you've seen work for a minute. And you talked about guided reading. You talked about sort of finding students at their level. We've obviously learned a lot about zone of proximal development. You know, you got to get in the ZPD. At the same time, you know, there is a real concern that if you meet people at their level, you never actually level up and give them the opportunity to move up. So just wade into that for us a little bit. What's your thought on this, Preston?
Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. We here as educators, man, we are great at extremes. Whole language or phonics, right? Like it's one or the other, right? Like God forbid that both might be right and the answer might be in the middle, right? Like watch, even out of this pandemic, like the extremes, I can so see that, right? The extremes are going to happen. Oh, we all have to teach like this, and this is the way moving forward, right? Yeah. Which, and if we're like, I'll give an example of this, right? Lunch. We do Rocketship lunch. We gather our kids every morning. We do this. It's like a big assembly. It brings joy and community and culture. We didn't come up with this idea. This came out in the 70s when they were doing these schools and communities for excellent schools. Like this is a known strategy. It was great back then. And then it got ditched, right? It was a whole new, like, no, we got to go all this and we got to get like more direct instruction. And and then we like rediscover things. So for me, I deeply believe the answer is in the middle, right? The answer is always in the middle. So on this debate, I think it's a silly debate because both are right. So even in our model, and I think that's the beauty of the Rocketship model, is like, you know what, there's certain times where, yes, I need to be at your level. If I'm going to catch you up as a reader, I need to give you direct instruction or small group instruction at your level. If I'm going to teach you as an English language learner, I need to have some part of the day I'm teaching you exactly at your language level, right? Like you are going to move much more rapidly. And this is one of the mistakes I've seen in intervention. I've seen teachers in guided reading, they'll go way above in a group and do small group guided reading way above the level. The assumption is, well, the kids will move faster because I'm giving them more rigorous. No, like that is not the time to give them more, like they need it at their level and they'll actually move more rapidly with the right consistency and instruction. On the other side, we've got a time of our day called closed reading. Closed reading is like, we need to expose you to grade level content. You are going to see this at the end of the year. You need to see it. You need to understand it. The art and the exercise is around comprehension and writing. So you're not actually asked to read the like paper, right? Like fluent readers and the teacher read the article, read the story, right? Your job is to become disciplined in terms of comprehension and grow those skills and be exposed to grade level text. So like it's built into our model. Even if you like watch our STEM classes, right? It's like we have small group where we're trying to catch you up on gaps, because if you have core number sense gaps, that's going to be really bad in algebra and other times, right? So we need to fill those gaps, and we need to teach you grade level content and like have you keep going, right? So I think it's a blend of both. And I like, frankly, I think that debate is silly. And it just undermines us as educators, because it really undermines what is the true art of education. It's the true art of teaching, right? Is both.
The art of teaching is both pushing ahead and supporting the gaps.
It's scaffolding, right? The art of teaching is standing before your class and identifying, oops, there's a gap here. How do I circle back and fill that while I'm still driving on content and knowledge you need to know, right? Like that, that is the profound art of teaching. And so, yeah, I think when we get in this debate, it's to be like, I don't know what facilitates the debate. Sometimes I'm like, are they just trying to push their product? But it's a silly debate, and it really undermines like what is the art of teaching and what we really need teachers to be and what we need our public schools to be.
Yeah. I think, you know, time is ultimately a zero-sum game. And I think it's just a question of how do we spend time with kids effectively. And that I think leads to it feeling like a pressured equation. But I very much agree, in the theme that is coming across all of these interviews is that it is the both and it is the meet in the middle. What doesn't work? Tell us more about what maybe you've tried that doesn't work, or you've seen from others that in particular, anything that surprises you about things that don't work.
I would say we've tried different intervention programs. I don't want to name names, but they haven't been very effective. Like what we've learned is guided reading and actually like double dosing on guided reading. So multiple kind of small group reading, direct reading instruction is really powerful. So we've really leaned into that. That's actually probably the most powerful sort of way to like catch kids up and fill gaps. I'd also say like what doesn't work, especially for the communities we serve, are suspensions or demerit culture. Like that's something, we at sometimes have been made fun of by our no excuses peers because we're too loose in our culture. And I think that's a good thing, right? There needs to be joy. There needs to be social emotional learning and positive behavior and interventions and support. So really kind of creating a strong community, right? I talked about like we start with lunch, like we're built around community. Then our kids go and they have breakfast, which is followed by a social emotional learning lesson, right? Their parents are welcome, right? Like that feeling of safety and joy and celebration. And I think this is where this balance comes in, right? It's not great as a student if it's always grade level and you're behind, right? Because you get this, school is not a joyful place, right? So if you can feel like I'm always winning, that's a huge win. And then I'd also say we've learned, especially in our learning lab where we're going, providing a really rich experience there has been huge. So we've extended, so that space still has our tutors and interventions, but it also includes, and we've always done PE, so they have like physical enrichment, but also now it has hands-on science, it has robotics. We've really leaned even further in developmental play. So how do you make sure that there's, even for your most struggling kids, there's at least one part of their day they are like really looking forward to and really engaged in, which can totally kind of shift their learning experience.
Thank you. All really helpful to hear. Can we talk about assessment for just a couple of minutes? This is another place that I feel like there's some debate emerging, in particular about what to do as students return, anticipating that extended disrupted time out of school is going to cause learning gaps that we need to sort of understand and then treat. And yet other schools of thought that really are worried about the unintended traumatic consequences further testing could play out for kids, especially at a time when they are already really heightened and recovering from every number of traumas themselves. And so how are you all thinking about the testing question, like what to assess, how to assess, what to do with the data?
I guess I haven't heard this debate as much, so it sounds like you've heard far more than me. We're planning, data drives our learning at Rocketship, right? It drives our model, especially on the like, what are the gaps and how can we help you most rapidly? I think it is unfair to our kids, and frankly, like I think it's a disservice of duties to our kids and families if we don't do that, right? Like how do we look a parent in the face and say your kid's doing great and they're on track, and we haven't really assessed that, right? So I think that's like a dereliction of duty almost. If the concern for me in listening to that second part is like if the concern is around trauma or emotional experience or what, like for me, that's like, that gets to like the culture of the room, the culture of the school, the culture of like how it's presented and the rationale and how it's utilized, right? So I think it's a fair point. If like the data is not going to be used and it's just going to make kids feel, inferior and that they did fall behind, then yeah, that is absolutely a problem. But for us, like when we focus on assessments, it's not, it's meant to be positive, right? We celebrate growth, and our kids know, it's just so in our culture, and our teachers and staff know, like, hey, we take a baseline annually, because to your point, we want to know, how did you do over the summer, right? Have you grown, or like, where are the gaps? And like, great, now we can get started. And how are we judicious in testing, so there's not over assessing, but it is a frequent sort of like touch point to like, hey, are we on track? Are we making gains? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to think about a different tutor because there's a better relationship there? Do we need to think about a different program? Oh, great, you know, you've moved on to a new guided reading level. Like, let's make sure we're challenging you appropriately. So this is going to be core. Like, we can't wait to get our kids back and be able to do this. I'll also name, we got a really cool tool internally that allows us, through our online programs, which is only one small part of our internal platform, because we're doing live teaching and social emotional, a bunch of other stuff. But these online programs that we have a tool that allows us to daily track completion, progress, and these correlate to grade level standards. So we're going to be able to leverage, we're able to leverage this tool daily. We're able to coach kids in our coaching calls, which are happening 3 to 4 times a week. And we're going to use these at the end of the year to be able to authentically say to families, based on this data, here's where your kid is at on grade level, and here's the things they need to work on over the summer. So I think we're probably, I mean, we've built this tool on our own. We're probably the only one in the country that has this. And like, so I've also been thinking, you know, when districts and other schools think about like intervention, like this kind of tool would be immensely helpful, especially when coupled with online programs that are really around practice. So not the introduction of material. We don't really think that's the best online tool, but practice of material. We think it could be really powerful and really addressing what I think many people are rightfully concerned about, is like, how do we catch kids up? And I think a tool like this coupled with the right programs could be really powerful.
So eager to dig into more on that. So we may have to come back to you and talk more, get a description of that tool. Any final thoughts? Anything that you feel like you all are thinking about that is helping you as you think about the task ahead?
No, I feel good. I did my job as a teacher. I hooked you into the next day of teaching. So as a teacher, I felt good. No, I mean, I'd say I haven't heard a lot of discussion about this, and this is very much on my mind. So I brought up the parent thing and community, but the other thing is like I haven't seen anybody talk about bringing back 4 and 5-year-olds who have never been to school, have just spent 5 to 6 months by their parents' side, right? And they come back to school and people are wearing gloves and masks. Like the first day of school is scary enough, and frankly for families.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And no one, and because we specialize in elementary, and I get it, elementary is the easiest group to teach, which is what everybody says, but I fundamentally disagree with. The pedagogy is immense in elementary. Nobody's talking about like how do you do that well? And so we've been obsessing about this at Rocketship. And I just think it's such a big deal in terms of like, because the kids model what their parents are feeling. And that first day of school is going to be really big hurdle for a lot of families, let alone dropping off your 4 or 5-year-old for the first time. And they've been by your side for 6 months. So I've been fascinated about the absolute void of this conversation. And like, it's something we're obsessing over at Rocketship. So I'll also say this, like, we've got our distance learning launchpad, which is up on our website. It's sharing external materials. It's not our internal platform, but it's got a lot of how-to guides. As we start figuring things out, we're going to be posting them up there. But I really would hope and pray that our educators and school system leaders would really obsess over this question for our 4 and 5-year-olds as they come back.
I'm the mother of a 4-year-old, and we had the last day of preschool where we just drove and picked up his, cubby contents yesterday. And so you just took me to quite a personal place on that. Thank you for sharing that. And we will continue to learn together in community as we explore the question of how to support students in the recovery from COVID. Thank you, Preston, for joining us.
Thank you. Stay well, Emily.
Likewise.